and then it's either I trade off sleep for security research or find little nuggets of time during the day. But I love security. It's both a career as well as a hobby. And I would say too, one of the things about this time especially is that I've been in security now for about 12 years doing actual direct security roles in various areas. But I would say if you are, whether you're starting out in security or you're just looking for that next step, this time right now has been unprecedented in like at least all of the past decade of that I've been in security, in terms of just the amount of things you can get engaged in, the amount of free resources, the virtual conferences like this that are going on just constantly. It's no longer an issue of budgetarily I can't afford this or I can't travel here. It's literally a consumption issue, and that's a challenge. And that's one of the things that I would say, if you're taking the next step, look for those free resources, get engaged, whether it's capture the flags, whether it's bug bounties, whether it's watching free resources, or if you can't watch a conference during the day like this, watch the recordings of them, find out, follow social media. I know one of the things I missed, that I kind of missed as the industry got started, was kind of that growing up in IRCs and chat rooms. I just missed a lot of that phase. I feel like we've returned to that, and it's awesome, and I'm eating it up. And I would advise you as well, stay engaged during this. Join the Slack channels, join the Discord teams to be able to communicate directly with all these people that you watch through Twitter or through the industry, and just sitting in the same chat rooms, talking back and forth, bouncing ideas. It's a time that I have not seen in my entire career, and it's awesome. And as discouraging as it can be, where we're not going to be in person at a lot of these conferences, we're not going to get to talk, it's also a limiter for a lot of people. And now it gives a lot of equal opportunity for all of us to kind of join together, and let's make security better. And that's kind of what drove this talk, is how can we do a better job finding those gaps, those holes, the things that we've systemically struggled with as a program, as an industry, and how can we make it better? How can we take this collaborative atmosphere, learn from each other, not recreate the wheel, and how can we move faster? So that's what I want to share with you today. And hopefully, no matter what level you're coming at, whether whether you live, sleep, and breathe in code, whether you're a manager, whether you're an aspiring career information security, whatever you want to do, that's kind of the key advice. And also, this is kind of a message to managers as well, leaders in your programs, in your companies. One thing that I kind of find that I struggle with is ambition and curiosity. And we have so many people, especially the ones that, of anybody that's on this today, that's given up your Saturday to be engaged, you're the ones that are the future of this industry, the ones that are going to continue to lead us forward. And it's tough a lot of times to find that time. I know it's an investment in that personal time, but at the same time, where can we find those trade-offs where you can invest time like this during your work day to make yourself better? And that's, at least for me, something that I've always struggled with, and I think it's important. And now's the time where can we start finding balances, so that way, I know for me, I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old at home, and my security research time is not spent during the evenings when I get home from work. It's the time spent at 11 p.m. and later, whenever I'm sacrificing sleep, because I just have that desire to be the best, to want to learn. And I'm sure a lot of you are in that same state, where it's like you just can't do more, and it becomes that balance of burning out versus the opportunity. But I will tell you right now, this is probably the best time in my entire career that I've seen, where you can be engaged and be a part of things. And it's just so fun and exciting. So I hope that I can reflect some of that. I'm going to give you nuggets of career growth, how you can, and I'm going to actually dig down too and show some pretty technical details, and try to hit all aspects. This is a quote that I pulled a couple of years ago. It's actually from 2017. And I pretty much live by this, in terms of things will never move this slowly again. And I can't see a show of hands, but that's so true. And it's only gotten truer year after year. And it just feels like everything is moving so fast around us as security professionals. How will we ever keep up? Just today alone, I found we've seen ways to bypass firewalls. We've seen honeypots. We've seen, enumeration. Just, there's so many things going on. How do we keep up as an industry? The other part of this is, and I loved how we started off the day talking about containers, and I feel like that's where we're going. Is, if you look in this left side of the slide with the bolts on security, this is kind of the historic castle moat mentality, where we invest millions of dollars into this core infrastructure of security that you will never go outside of. We have defense in depth, we have layers. That's not where the world is going. Now, we will always have kind of this legacy atmosphere, but what's happening is, we're talking security by design, we're talking embedded security, we're talking that shift left, where security now, it's not only just secure code, This is an ecosystem that you are deploying where you need to embed all security layers, all depth into your application, into your infrastructure, into your code essentially. And I think Paul made the comment even, or somebody did today, about talking about DevOps and how you really need to be a network engineer and a app developer and a system infrastructure engineer, server admin. You almost have to have all of that tied up into your application, and that is really difficult. And if there was an area that I would say that to be better at security just in general is, you're now starting to be better, you need to know all these areas. And unfortunately, it's not just being deep in one and wide in everything. It's now a point of, we don't have enough headcount, enough staff, enough resources to be deep everywhere. How do we cover these gaps and learn, and how do we maintain? And it's almost exhausting, but you have to love it and you have to enjoy it and know that there's going to be failures, there's going to be breaches, there's going to be issues along the way. And what we need to strive for is, where can we do better? Where can we solve the mundane tasks that take up our time so we can focus on the innovation, so we can stay ahead of those red teamers, the adversaries, and build resilient systems that have these layers of security without burning ourselves out and being effective, while also changing that model without always changing the people, but upskilling, changing, and where to learn, where do I spend the time? And it's difficult, and it's exciting at the same time, and it's really fascinating to watch. And I would say any companies are moving that direction. Whether you're Castle Moat today, you're not going to be in the future to be successful as a company, as a business. And not only that, but now we're starting to talk cloud infrastructure, cloud computing technology. We're no longer backhauling data all through this millions of dollars security stack in your data centers. You now have a data center with that stack, you have a cloud with this stack, and you have about 200 other SaaS infrastructure as service clouds that are not routing back to your data center. Those are going either directly from a user to a cloud, it's going from cloud to cloud, and it is just becoming so decentralized ecosystem where, how do we address that? How, as security professionals, can we win? Can we overtake this? And I know I didn't sign up to lose. And I know a lot of times we'll say, well, a breach is inevitable. It's just a matter of if not, or a matter of when, not if. However, but I don't want to lose, and I want to be as successful as possible, and I want to make everybody around me as successful as possible for that. So we're going to talk about ways we can do that. Does anybody feel like Dennis here in information security, where you feel like the world is just moving around you, everything is getting automated moving forward, but in security it's always, you need to talk to so and so, or you can't go forward because there's too much risk or doing that. That's how we have to get better at this. We Not every decision in security has to be made by a person. It's, how can we leverage data? How can we make these data driven decisions and move forward without having to be that roadblock? Because a lot of these processes, as we've talked about CI/CD today, the continuous integration, continuous deployment, there's no room in CI/CD for manual steps, manual processes. So I recommend, if you're trying to move faster and move forward, look into your information security program or the way that you operate in your job and say, are there steps where somebody has to talk to me? And if that's the case, how do you automate it? How do you figure out what goes through my brain, what goes through my head, that I make the decision, rather than, is it possible to codify? Is it possible that we can have this buffer of risk appetite? And start thinking in terms of, how can I get rid of those manual steps so I can move forward and focus on the new technologies that we need to look at, whether it's containers and the cloud and big data and all these things. It's not like you're working yourself out of a job. It's codifying what you're good at, and then so you can get better. And I think if you take that mentality, it's pretty exciting. And I'm going to show you some ways and tool sets where you can start to do that. I also love this quote by Jeremiah Grossman, mostly because it's scary that I believe it's true. And I spent a couple of years at an insurance company, and you better believe, if you've ever placed a claim, I mean, everything in a security company is measured through actuarial data, through statistics, through data driven. They know, if you do these things, you're going to have this likelihood of this happening. Doesn't that sound like security? If you do these things, this likelihood is happening, but in most of the time, it's our own gut feel. What if industries like the insurance industry actually passes up the entire security industry and says, I can predict the breach better than you can predict it yourself as a security professional? And I think that's scary, but I also think it's true. And I think that's where we're headed as the industry is evolving around us, because there's so much business around it, so much statistics, so much data. We need to get better as professionals to do that as well and look at the data. I see three major shifts across the entire landscape of just technology in general. And we've been seeing this forever. This isn't necessarily new, but I think it's starting to accelerate and it's starting to hit all business areas, not just specific ones. And the first one is data gravity. A lot of times you'll hear the question of, well, we're going to the cloud. We only need to do, why can't we do everything in Amazon? Or why can't we do everything in Google or Microsoft or IBM? Well, the challenge is data. Everybody is moving more from a business standpoint against data driven decisions, data driven analytics, logs, metadata, tagging, collection, all of that. And that data gravity is very expensive a lot of times to move. So it's actually more efficient, more effective to move your compute, your infrastructure, your platforms, your embedded ecosystem of security closer to that data. And that's the point, is if we can get our systems embedded with security by design principles and do that, then move them wherever you need, push them to the data so your business can make faster decisions and we can be enabling the business at the same time. But it's tough, it's challenging. One size does not fit all in the world that we're living in. And I'll give you some additional examples of why that's the case. The other area is democratized accessibility of data. I don't know if you've ever gone out and just searched for data, what data is out there that you can leverage and do, but it's pretty cool and exciting. And these are just some security examples alone. But as you're a red team or a bug bounty hunter or anything like that, did you know that Rapid7 has a data set that's publicly available, publicly accessible to everybody on here, that has the forward DNS of the entire internet? I mean, just that data alone, think about it from a, and I know there's tools like AMAS and others that I know Jason Haddix is going to talk about the bug bounty methodology, and a lot of that is tapping into these data sources. So there are tools that do it and already do it, but just knowing that that's out there for me, GitHub, that is cached. The public GitHub repos are in a big data set that you can query, you can search against, you can do that. You talk about Symantec, or this SemGrep that we talked about earlier. There's a data set called Common Crawl, and I'm going to show you a few examples with several of these a little bit later on in this talk. But Common Crawl has been crawling the internet of public websites for years, for about 8 years now, and they have the full HTML captures of it. So that includes like all of your JavaScript references, includes full. I mean, if you think HTML, it has every link, every change. And they've been doing that for 8 years now. And there's about 25 billion sites in that data set alone that we have free access to. The question is how? How do we get access? How do we leverage it? Picture Google search for HTML. How awesome is that? I think it's exciting. But we need to figure out, how do we get to that data and how do we start to adopt those principles? The other part is, if you look at what's going on around us in the world, COVID-19, there is data everywhere that is being freely given, freely uploaded, so that we can find a cure, a vaccine, a solution to this, that you or I could literally, if we had the right molecular structures and information, like the data is out there for us. We just need to know how to tap into it. How do we build those resources? And that's where companies are striving. They're saying, help us, collaborate with us. We can make business decisions and benefit from these things, but this is for you. We want to bring the world closer together to solve the world's most challenging questions. And that's where the light bulb kind of went off for me, is, well, if the world is solving these problems, information security in comparison to COVID-19 is minute. So what if we could use these same approaches, these same tools, to solve the same problems as we have systemically in the security? So I started digging in, and I know within big data science, there's probably a lot that are watching this that have already been dug into Jupyter notebooks and different things. But the biggest third change of the industry is, it's financially viable now to do more deep analysis, to query big data sets, to do it for pennies on the dollar, not thousands of dollars of investment into a massive home lab of server racks, and doing, just stand up a few things in the cloud, make sure you shut them down when you're done with them, and you can solve some major problems very quickly, and it's accessible to you in minutes. And it's pretty exciting time. I saw this was probably like, yeah, June 19th. This was just a few days ago. Gave the engineer, I need to do a stream where people bring me their infosec spreadsheets and I process them in R. They who I bet everybody on here lives in spreadsheets, especially in security. Security is notorious for spreadsheets. It's terrible. And how many times have you done the same changes, the same modifications to a spreadsheet over and over to get metrics to produce and doing things? Why don't we automate that? Why do we still go in today into a spreadsheet and make changes on a month by month basis to get metrics? And I think that's the point of this, is there's better ways of doing things. So I didn't even hear about a Jupyter notebook until about 3 years ago when I joined Lilly and I was working with a lot of the research scientists, and I couldn't believe that I went my entire career without even hearing about it. So my thought is, well, what is this? It's got to be this indestructible thing that you just can't damage. It's probably this like little Chromebook that's in a vault or something. Well, that could survive on Jupyter. That's not the case. It's just a piece of software. It's browser based and it's open source. Anybody can download it. Hopefully, you're downloading it now as we're talking about this. Supports over 40 programming languages. And the notebooks contain live code. So somebody like me who is, I'm not a programmer by trade. I know enough to be dangerous. I can get in, but if you look at any of my code, which I shared on GitHub ahead of time, you know that it's pretty simple. It's anything you're going to see in W3 schools, and that's about it. And that's about as far as I go. So it's digestible. But the thing that I get a lot of value out of, like something like a Jupyter notebook, is I don't have to set up this big decompiler, this environment where I'm trying to struggle. What's this script doing and doing that? You can break it up pretty easily and run different pieces. So it's really like a debugger, but it's friendly for people that don't program by trade all the time. So you think of like citizen developers, scientists, people that are maybe math geniuses and wizards that are good at those things, but they're not computer coding programmers. They can take this and do those bits and pieces. They know enough to look at Stack Overflow and know what they need to achieve. And by searching, you can solve some pretty neat things with that. There's a bunch of libraries too. These are a lot of your data science type libraries. So if you want to do statistics or graphs or charts, there's Matplotlib, there's NumPy, there's Bokeh. Bokeh is actually pretty cool because it can create URLs for it. So it can actually generate like an interactive HTML page that if you have metrics or things you want to zoom in on, you could push that over to like a serverless Lambda to publish it out in S3, and you could literally have a web page of interactive graphics and things like that for metrics. So some cool ideas. Dask is working for bigger data sets where a lot of this runs in memory in a Jupyter notebook, but if you have data sets that are too large, Dask is a library. It'll just write it to your hard drive and read it off. So lots of things built for solving some of the biggest data challenges where we can also take advantage of for information security. The other piece is that security experts love to tell stories. And I think that's something that we all like to talk about. Well, we did this during this red team, or this was a hack that we heard about or did. And as we should be better at telling stories that are data driven. And if you look at these things, these are just data visualizations made with Jupyter type notebooks and the scientific computing libraries, where I think one of these is the node dependency graph and chart, and one is Python, all of the pie. I should have actually double checked what those, but it's awesome. It's like the dependencies and the edge nodes and everything and you can tell some pretty strong stories. And with me, I've been working a lot with scientists lately. And when you work with scientists, everything is how do we solve this hypothesis? How do we ask a question? And we all learned about this in fifth grade. And this is the basic of let's ask a question, let's construct the hypothesis, let's test it. Does it work? Yes or no? If it does, let's analyze the data and let's draw conclusions out of it. Why are we so bad in information security at doing this? Why do we just build off of risk-based decisions or say no over and over without really quantifying, does this make sense? Is there enough risk where it's willing to stop the business? What if the business can make $3 billion if we just allow this little low or medium vulnerability into the system because we don't have the right depth of coverage in it? Like there's those things that those are all data driven type decisions that we need to get better at. We need to think about. So in terms of how can we codify all these decisions we make on a day-to-day basis? And I think that's critical to being further successful in your career. So it's asking the right questions. And this is advice I like to give to if you're an engineer, a programmer, or somebody that wants to continue to move up, whether it's into leadership or doing, you have to think about the questions of what those stakeholders and those business stakeholders care about. So if you're an adversary, I might ask the question of, well, how can I perform more passive reconnaissance without touching the target? What that means when you're talking to your CISO is really your CISO just wants to know, what does our external attack surface look like? So you could be talking about, well, this is really cool and this is our newest, latest attack, but really what you need to do is raise it up to, here's our external attack surface. This is what you should be most concerned about. This is what we need to cover. And then if you're like a CEO who's talking about board of directors or cyber insurance leaders, what they're interested in from a business perspective is, what does our company look like to our shareholders? What information is out there where we can compare ourselves in the industry? And there's tons of companies out there that are starting to do that, whether it's a BitSight or a Risk Recon and difference, where they can actually create kind of credit scores of what you look like to the internet, whether you have certificates that are expired, or you have not using the right headers and things like that. And there's a lot of analysis. And I bet if you're a pen tester or a red teamer in here, you already know that as soon as you go to a site and you start looking at a target domain, you start seeing these things. These are red flags. You know you're going to find something juicier from this target. That's the same type of data points that our CEOs are getting, the boards of directors are getting to rate CEOs of how they're doing, CISOs of how they're doing. Is, here's your scorecard against a peer in the industry. And then as you're an engineer, an architect, or somebody building the program, you have to think in terms of, those are the questions, those are the things that the CEOs and CISOs are facing. How can we make them successful? Because if we can make them successful, if we can make our leaders successful, it will ultimately make you successful. So we're going to jump into our first demo. I know we've been talking for a while, and I definitely will. I'll be in the Discord for to answer any questions afterwards. If you know me, I could talk about security 24/7 all the time. So there's no shortage of conversations here. But let's jump right in. So this is one example I want to share, and I wrote the first blog post on this one, doing so it kind of walks through a lot of the details, but I think this is just really cool, and it's something we can set up. And if you've ever done any bug bounty or recon, it's just the simplicity and the speed of how you can get some of these results, and just thinking. So as I go through these demos, I want you to think through these as kind of like templates of like, well, how's he doing this and what code, and how can I adjust this to solve this problem that applies to me or my company or my program. And that's the biggest thing I ask is, even though this will do specific things, I'm trying to build kind of an ecosystem. And I called it Project Straylite in GitHub. And it's something that for me, I've not been good at, from an industry standpoint, of being out there. Probably most of you have actually never heard of me. I would say that I am one of the biggest lurkers though. And I feel like I know everybody in the industry because I just spend so much time reading about what they write and their work and doing. And that's something that kind of in 2020, I said, I want to get better at contributing and giving back, and all this knowledge that I've gained, that I've invested into companies and doing it on my day-to-day job. How do I share these things that are not intellectual property for our own companies, but things that will just make us all better as a whole and as an industry? So that was kind of one of my 2020 resolutions: is let's get a blog started. Let's get better at producing things in GitHub. So this is my attempt to really start that, and I'm hoping to stick with it. So I hope everyone on here holds me accountable to this, and I hope that everyone here can also share if you see mistakes or things where, hey Ryan, you could enhance this. Well, let's make it better. Let's work together. I mean, that's what I want. And I think the other advice that I always have is, if you're worried or nervous, one of the scariest things is sharing in front of your own peers of experts. I could talk all day long to people within a company that are outside of security and talk about security. It's scary giving your own information out, whether it's your code, whether it's doing. There's so much imposter syndrome, and I know it's rampant. I would just say my advice is, don't let that stop you. I There's very little that I've pulled directly from one person, because nothing is perfect that's out there. I could tell you that everything I talk about today, there's at least one person watching this right now that is better than me, way better than me at every one of these areas. But it's just a matter of getting information out there so that I can learn from what you're providing. That may help me here, or what I'm providing. I don't expect this to help you directly, but by me providing this, hopefully you can take it and apply it to something that will help you. And I think that's just an awesome approach, but it's scary. And I encourage anybody that's kind of thinking about it or wanting to, just jump in and do it. That's I'm going to try to be transparent and do the same thing with you. So this is what a Jupyter notebook looks like. You can run this locally in Anaconda, or really, Anaconda is if you want to run locally, it's free, open source. Or I'm actually running out of the SageMaker notebook in AWS. I partially do this because I'm responsible for securing a lot of AWS. So the best way to secure things is to understand how they work, how they interact, how you can operate in an ecosystem. So, and then also I'm using a lot of calls within the AWS ecosystem, and just by nature of running in there, you can kind of eliminate some of the secrets and keys and do things through IAM roles. So there's a lot of resources out there. There's Google Collaboratory and things, but I would say just jump into a notebooking solution and just check it out and see if it's for you. I love it, and I can't believe I went about 8 to 9 years of my career without ever being in this. So this is how you break it apart too. If you're not a great programmer, just break it into sections. And I'm gonna start off by running this. So this just does my imports. And then we're going to ignore this. This is just if you're setting this up inside AWS Athena, this is that database server that it's going to actually call out. So we don't have to copy all the data from that data set. It's already hosted in a public data set in AWS for the Rapid7 data set. So we just want to query against it. We don't want to pay for all the data there. We're going to let them take care of that for us. So this just sets it up. It's 3 simple queries. If you ever run a database query, just run this in Athena and you'll have it set up in about 10 minutes, probably less. So we're going to jump down to here, and this is going to start running the code. And this can take, this is the cool thing. If you're on a bug bounty, you're looking for targets, literally you can put in whatever domain you want in here. So we could choose anything. And if this was more, I wasn't brave enough to do the interactive through discourse like they did earlier. So props to that. But let's just do Microsoft.com since it's already in this. So what this is going to do is this is going to search the 4DNS massive data set provided by Rapid7 for any entries for Microsoft.com. So we're just going to run it. I just press run. What this little output is this is just my execution ID by Athena. It's running the query right now saying this is how I can reference it to know. So I went ahead, I got that pretty instantly. I'm going to run this next function and it's going to take a few seconds. This query is running across, I don't think it's terabytes. I think this is actually like gigabytes, probably like 25 gigabytes of indexes. And so it's going through running. Every time it says running, it's 5 seconds. You can, the blog that I posted actually has a lot of the details of what it's doing behind the scenes. But really, this is just going in a 5-second loop saying, are you done? Are you done? Are you done? And then what it's going to do is it's going to get the code behind this is going to get an S3 download of this Athena query results. So the Athena is resolving saying, give me all of the Microsoft.com entries wildcarded, and then put them into a CSV. And then this last step this is what's pretty cool. If you've never heard of Python pandas, literally, if you have a CSV file, this is all I do is I just say, read the CSV. It's a one-liner and you bring it. And this is what gave the engineers referencing how easy it is to bring in a CSV file and put it into a data frame so you can modify it automatically through code. So this is returned. This didn't take very long already right now. And look at this. If you're a bug bounty, you have a domain, a target, a wildcard. Look at this. This is Microsoft.com wildcard. And keep in mind, we never touched Microsoft systems. This is purely off of just a publicly available data set that we queried. So no interaction with the target. It brought back 18,000 rows. So we have 18,000 rows loaded into memory right now. And what do we want to do? We want to map this. So right now, this is neat enough in itself. If you talk recon, this is pretty cool. And we had this in like under a minute. But we're going to go ahead and run the next step. And this is, I believe, this is going to map. It's going to start doing geolocation. So it's actually using the MaxMind database that you might be familiar with. And I'm using the free light copy of that, just compares it to the database or to the local 82 megabyte file. And what I just did was I took every one of these IP addresses, ran it all 18,000 of these against the MaxMind, and now I have a latitude and longitude of every one of these with just a couple lines of code. There's some more behind this get location that you can review and do. But the goal of everything, if you go through my Jupyter notebooks out here and it says core functions, these are written agnostic to the process. So these are not specific to Project Sonar or anything like that. This is written so that way you can pass things in and get the same entries back. So all I did was I took this data frame here and I passed the entire data frame, because let's make it easy. Let's just pass the whole data frame at this function. And all I did here, this value, this is the column that has the IP addresses in here. So if you go and look these IP addresses, all I'm specifying in this command is the IP addresses. So any CSV file that you have that you want, you can use this code. If it's just an output of a CSV file that has 5,000 IPs or target lists or indicators of compromise, things like that, you can run it through this command and geolocate all of these, which is pretty neat. It returns that back. And then this one is going to do some continued preparations. I believe, this just aggregates the data. So that was pretty fast, 18,000 lines of code aggregated here. So we can kind of start to summarize the concentrations of latitude, longitude for the different pieces. And then if we jump into this next one, the data set, we're going to run this last line, and this is just going to produce a heat map using the Google Maps API. And this is, just to point this out, if I wouldn't have talked so much during this, if I would just shut my mouth and just click buttons, we would have had this heat map for Microsoft.com in under 2 minutes. total. And I mean, this is a global heat map now, interactive map where I can zoom in on, and you can look at their entire external attack surface all within a couple minutes of some queries. And just think about the value that you could give to your CISO at your company and say, we can run this on a case by case basis. And I mean, let me zoom in here to just this area here. I mean, some of it's going to, depending on, I mean, you know how IPs map, some are going to be based on the center of cities. Others are going to show like there's a, must be Quincy, Washington, there's something here. But if you zoom in, you can see you can see Redmond, Seattle. I mean, it's pretty detailed. You can zoom in, hone in, and pretty neat stuff. So I don't know. I thought it was pretty awesome. And so you can do that with any company though. The blog, I think, goes on to compare the top 5 cloud providers in there. So let's jump back to our slides. So that's just one thing you can use, and I recommend at least pulling some of the snippets of code out and see where, if you're working in a security operations center or anything like that, where you can use these things. So let's jump into the next one. So let's say I don't want to deal with big data, Ryan. I don't care about IP addresses. I don't care about heat mapping, but you run an application security program where you're a manager that's just dealing with spreadsheets. This is another example where we're using these huge scientific computing tools. We're going to process about probably like a 300 kilobyte spreadsheet that just tracks our BSIM score. So BSIM is just one way you can measure an application security program called Building Security and Maturity Model. I like it. I've used it extensively in the past. And so what we're going to do is we're going to jump back over into this notebook, but this is kind of the outputs of how do we talk to this. Let's jump into this one. This is more lightweight now. So this is I just have it, and check this out. It's not even a CSV. Pandas can read in directly Excel spreadsheets. So you don't even have to worry about formatting or doing this. Just bring it in, read underscore Excel. That's the function. And you could put a parentheses here and just read it in. I went ahead to call out some of the other things. Like I didn't want to use all the columns in the spreadsheet, so I just said use these. I wanted to specifically convert them over to some strings, floats, integers, and things for some of the calculations. So just something that I prefer to do, and you can replicate that. So if you have any Excel spreadsheet you want to try to pull into Pandas data frame, here's some example right here. Let's run this one. So all this did is this literally just pulled in the spreadsheet, and this just shows the data frame here. So this is what it looks like today. It's just here's the activities in the BSIM, here's the activity, the level, and then this is where the measurements come in. So currently true means this is where we're at. And then I would say from a projected standpoint, this is where I want to be in the future. And this comes down to that metrics play of how can we tell metrics on a regular automated continuous basis? Well, you can use something like this tool to do that. So this is our target. So you have to update the raw data somewhere, whether that's in a system. Ideally, you're not updating in a spreadsheet, but you're actually querying like your vulnerability management tool or your application security tool, and you just keep it in there, or even like an Archer from a risk management, different things. You can just make the API call, pull it in, and get this, and you have your score. So let's just say we want to process it. So this is Plotly here. It's running it, pulls in the scores, does some calculations, and should take a second here. There it goes. And then with literally 2 button clicks, I have the updated data that I need from a metric standpoint to show kind of where we're at. Here's the future maturity. Here's where we're at today. And it's pretty neat and simplified. And let's make metrics easier. That's how we tell stories. That's how we get better. That's how you quantify money spends, future investment for your security program. So I can't emphasize enough the importance of that and just how simple it can be over and over. When you have to run this month by month and you want to move forward in your career, don't do this month by month. There's no gain of manipulating spreadsheets. But if you can pull it in here, say, put this on a cron job to run every 30 days in the cloud, kick it off with a Lambda, and you have it. And then let's load it into an S3 and advertise it. And you give your management the link. And anytime they go to it, you could run this every day if you wanted. And you have real-time metrics. And that way they never have to ask you. You don't ever have to ask them. And they're pretty excited that this can be a win for them if they ever need it on the fly. I think we have some more examples here. Let's see. It really comes down. So this was kind of a fun one. There's the CVE database. And if you've ever gone out to the CVE information, there's, actually we'll jump into it and show it, but this is another thing of talking about the same questions. Your patch management, your vulnerability management team probably is always thinking, why are we so busy over the holidays? Why does everything bad happen over the end of the year? That seems like that's always the joke. And the question is, it feels like that. And is it just because we're antsy to get out of the office? We don't want to have to pull back in, or is there data that can support that? And then from looking at it from your management perspective, you need to be able to tell them, we need to increase staffing to deal with security incidents, potential issues, make sure we have people on deck to help us at these times of the year. That's a projected value metric that you can actually do and share. And then from a CISO standpoint, the CISO might say, why are our vulnerability counts increasing over time? I thought we invested this many $100,000 into your program. Ryan, why are you doing a bad job on this? This is where you turn to your leadership and say, check this out. So let's do this. Let's look at the CV. So this does a live wget to the MITRE downloads, and there's an all item CSV. So we can go there, and I already downloaded. It's 82 megabytes, so I just ran it. It says file already exists, no need to download. So what we're going to do here is we're going to pull in this 82 megabyte CSV of every CVE that historically has ever been captured in this system. So here it is. There's 100 and that, just look at how fast that was too, that we just loaded this in. So 173,000 rows. These are all individual CVEs. Now some of these are candidates, some of these are approved, but just the matter of data, these are the lines we have into a data frame. So we can start processing it, and we might want to answer those questions we just looked at on that previous slide. So let's run the equivalent of, let's see how many of these occur per year. And just a note on this next command, I'm not calling any other functions from other notebooks. So this is literally 5 lines of code that can take this CSV input and tell us a story. So now these couple lines, this tells us exactly how many CVEs there have been per year. So you can look and see 1999, 249. 2019 was the highest historic number of CVEs published at 24,000. And then if you look at 2020, we're halfway through. We're actually only at 11,000. So we're trending a little bit for probably the first year in the history of CVEs. I believe we may end under, but maybe that's a story. But we don't know that. Projected wise, it's June we want to see. So let's figure out, we have now, how many years is that? That's 21 years of data. Let's see what our projections are for the remainder of the year looks like. So this is what, 3 more lines of code. And then now we have a count of these 20 years, which months had the most CVEs released and published? Well, if we look here, that first question of why does it always feel like we're getting hit with everything over the holidays? Look at this, 22,000 in December, 20,000 in January. That's why we're so busy. You look at kind of the summer months, everybody takes a break. 11,000 in May, June. I mean, it slows down, and then it almost doubles, and doubles, like you get half your vulnerabilities published in December and January. That's a pretty strong story from a resourcing standpoint, from a preparation staffing. And that's a data-driven metric that we can tell a story and stand behind. And that's where we struggle a lot of times as a professional, is we can't always stand behind it's just gut feel, or I know it always feels this way. Well, why does it feel that way? This is just one example of a story. Then, hey, if somebody doesn't like to look at tables, then here's a chart. Does this speak? This is something you put in the boardroom and show why, or your CISO, at least, probably not board level, but this is why we need to invest more in our vulnerability management program, because the vulnerabilities that we face are increasing exponentially year over year. And it's just a way to tell a story, make you better. And you know how impressive that is to a CISO to walk in and share that story. You better believe if there's money available in a budget and you come with a data-driven story to tell, you're probably going to be successful in getting that investment. Let's see what else we have. So this is all right. So this is one I'm pretty excited about. I don't know if anybody here watched my DerbyCon talk last year. This is really a build up off of that. So I hit a lot of these similar things. It's pretty similar to that. But one of the things that I wanted to do and accomplish was Common Crawl. I knew about it. I knew it was out there, and I wanted to say, how do we tap into this? As somebody that has done bug bounties in the past, or just from an application security perspective, it just seems so neat to be able to say, I can query this data set of cached content without having to touch the target ever, and see historically, year over year, month over month, what changes that occurred. I want to be able to do that. And so I finally, this past month, I've probably been, my security research time has been about 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. And I'll even say this past week, what we had, I don't know if anybody else is a nerd that's watching this, but we had Minecraft Ender update, or Nether update released this week, and I barely played that, so I can't wait till next week. We're gonna be staying up playing a lot of that. But I've been working on this Common Crawl work because I just wanted it to work, and so I want to demonstrate this, and it's pretty neat. There's some speed issues with this one a little bit depending on what you try to do. Well, let's walk through this and see if it works. I think this is pretty cool, and what I want you to do is just really think through of all the different things we could do with this. So we're gonna run that. Let's do this. This is just the database command. So this would be where you would go back into Athena and run these 3 queries to set this up. So super easy. It's three queries. It takes a couple minutes. This is another one where we can choose what target do we want to go for. I actually tried the Jungle.io site. It has not been cached into Common Crawl yet, so I couldn't run it against that one. So we're rather than picking, I actually ran defcon.org last night, and it returned, I think it was about 70,000 results, and I started processing it, and it was taking, I mean, it took about 20 minutes to get through things. So it takes some time, but the value is worth the time. And when I say 20 minutes, there's a lot of tools that do enumeration things that run. This is completely not touching any systems and running. So pretty neat. So we're just going to do derbycon.com, and we're going to run it, and it comes back in a reasonable time. So it's kicked off now. I should have cleared my output before this, but let's try, you know what, we're gonna go up here to kernel. This is how you clear all your outputs, restart and clear output. We're gonna try this from scratch, so there's no predetermined information in here. So let's kick this off. This is one I'm really excited about. It took a lot. I don't know if I've found anywhere that anybody is doing this from a security perspective, at a large scale, other than some higher level analytics around it. So I think this is pretty neat. All right, so now we have our execution ID. So we got that returned. So let's kick this off and start saying, are you done? Are you done? Are you done? So we're just gonna wait on our results to turn. Probably this one takes a few seconds, but it's not too bad. I'm really excited about all the grep tools and everything that's been displayed today, because you'll see the final output. I haven't been able to build a lot onto this, but the biggest thing is what do you do with a file structure of HTML files? How do we search against those? Is there an inventory of a dictionary of key things that we look at? Because a lot of times you look for different things like SQL injection. You look more at source code. We have to tailor this more so to HTML, ASPX type things. So you could look for comments, you can look for passwords, you could look for, and then also this common crawl, we'll see when the results return too, but it actually captures parameters. So somehow if it does like the referral and it has a parameter, you can actually query against this database for a certain parameter. So here's our data that came back. So it has 579 sites for DerbyCon in this. And like just how cool is this? I mean, we didn't even do a spider or anything against this domain at all. This is literally just data that's sitting out there saying, come get me. And we did. And so here, and you'll see there's a lot of duplicates here. This is what I think is pretty neat too, from a security perspective, is if you're doing bug bounties and things, you can actually see the reason this is different is because these were not distinct values. So this record length is different size, which means that this page changed between whatever month this is, 2013 to 2000. Those look similar, but you can kind of see over time how pages change if they've been cached multiple times. So if there ever was an issue in a page that they went back and fixed, let's say they accidentally put credentials in there in a comment or something, you can actually go back and find it in Common Crawl. And then what you can do is you can try to validate those credentials, even though they have been removed in the web page. Did they go back and change the password? Did they change the accounts? I mean, there's always things like that that can be helpful. Maybe it was an internally exposed API in there or call. Maybe it was a JavaScript file that's what, and it actually doesn't pull back a lot of the JavaScript, but you'll have all the references to them if they still exist. All right, so now that we have the data pulled back, let's see what we can do with this. So now this one is going to go through, and what this does, this is the part that I haven't seen a lot of. You can find a lot of examples just returning results like this. This actually goes through, and we're going to kick it off. It starts going through and it pulls all the areas into a data frame and gives you the URLs to download the exact HTML page. So rather than just querying against the index of content, we're going through now and we're getting all the, basically the S3 file locations for these pages. It's iterating through, and let's see if this comes, let's hope this finishes. If not, I'll jump in and show you, because it takes a little bit of time. But what it's doing is it's going through and it's actually printing that output into a file on the file system. So I have my Jupyter notebook here. You can see the file system. It's writing it, I believe it's into the temp directory. Yeah, because you can see in my DEF CON too. So if you have like, here's the DEF CON pages that I ran last night. If you jump in, here's the directory structure. So you picture like what the website looks like, and here's the HTML file. So you have all your HTML. These are just the plain text looking at the file system here. So what it's going through is it's looking at DerbyCon, it's pulling, here's the structure of the website, then here's all your HTML behind it. So once this finishes, one thing you can always do that's handy is you can see this little hourglass, so you know that it's still running and doing something. Because a lot of times it's, well, I'm just wondering what's going on. This hourglass can be helpful, especially if you didn't write outputs as it goes on regularly to know. And we failed. Well, yeah, process records. I'll fix that for everybody on there. It was working last night, but either way, here's the here's what it comes out with. So the next step of here, we always have to plan for some failed demo, right? Oh, I know why. I added this process records just because I was getting tired of waiting for DEF CON and I had no inputs or insights. And so I was running it, waiting for it to finish. So I believe this still finished and it just failed on that. So we'll go ahead, and what this does is this next command will process and it actually tars all this up. So we have it running in a SageMaker notebook on the actual notebook instance. We don't really want it there. If you want to pull it down locally so you can run semgrep and whatever tools you want, run it through your source code analysis tools, any static analyzers, just grep across it. So what this does, it tars it up into data output.tar. And then literally now let's go and let's see here. This tar file is now right here, written seconds ago. I didn't clear out the def con file, so we have all that too, but we can now download it to our system. That should save, but you download it. Let's scroll down to the bottom here. Wow, that's a lot. I should have limited my output too. That's why I use trim and tail and things like that. These are all notes. Learn from my mistakes here. All right, I think we're towards the bottom, but you can see all of these files. I mean, there's a lot of HTML you can do. And then what it does is it tars it up for you, and then you can download it locally and open it into Visual Studio Code or whatever you want and run tools against that directory structure there. The only caveat is that it's the HTML. So, if you load HTML and it references external JavaScript files and things like that, it's actually going to make the callouts to try to load the images and things. So if you try to load a page that you don't want that target to know, don't open it in a browser or something like that. Open it in a text editor, search it there, because it's going to make all the calls because it's running as an HTML file. So just something to be aware of. And one of the last things I wanted to show is this is just some other queries that you can run directly once you get it set up. So you could run, and maybe before you process it, you want to see how many distinct URLs we have for this before you start downloading and running my Jupyter notebook, and you're going to sit for hours and do all that processing. So you can throw it in there. This one's pretty cool. We're going to run this one. I don't know. I didn't plan for this one ahead, but let's try this. We can run this directly in SageMaker because I don't have a command, or directly in Athena because I don't have a command that's going to query that one directly from the Jupyter notebook. But you literally could just paste that query into the query statements I have above and adjust some of the code. Let's do this. So we're just paste this query into here, and this is neat. This is saying that search the entire data set of all of your historic common crawl data for a parameter called CMD equals, because wouldn't it be cool if we found one of those? So let's run this. Yeah, should have planned before live demos here. Let's see if we have a great table. It does work. Let's try this again. If this doesn't work, I'll fix it and I'll share an update. Oh, there we go. It was just my comment. It needed the dashes instead of a pound sign when you bring it over from a Python file. I don't think this takes very long to run. And what you could do too is, I mean, you have the example queries now of how to run against the domain. So you could literally put select this files where domain equals, and then so that way you don't have to pull back every single file and page that you have. But if you debug bounty or reconnaissance or red teaming, I think this is one of the coolest things I've seen in a while. So we'll give this a second to come back. We'll check on it in a minute here. Yeah, we're coming closer to the end of the presentation, so we'll have a few minutes to spare. Let's see, 41 seconds. I think it takes about a minute. We'll give it 10 more seconds and watch. I think it's more exciting than watching paint dry, but a new painted room does look pretty nice. If it goes over a minute, we'll just finish up and we'll check on this in a few seconds. All right, we'll come back to it. So if we're trying to solve some of these challenges, I think one of the things just with building a program and improving is that competition for talent. People are leaving all the time. You lose a lot of your best people and they're being recruited. You go day to day. It's important to keep them happy, to keep them working on things that are important to them. And it's also giving them time to invest in themselves and make themselves better. And if you can do that and cater to that, you're going to have somebody that knows they can be successful, because a lot of us are really competitive. We want to see a program succeed. We don't want to jump around time over time. It's just sometimes the stress of the job, the pressure, the redundancy, the mundane, that's boring. And a lot of us have come from the red teaming, the pen testing, the backgrounds where we don't want boring. We want to be solving these problems. We don't want to be stuck in this. You're expected to do this, automate that, automate the mundane, use those skills, use that talent and do that. So that's one part, is the competition. But I think program continuity is a bigger thing. And that's not just saying like your leadership leaves. I know those last stats were around CISOs, but how do you maintain program continuity? And what I just showed you, the things that if you were doing these examples in a spreadsheet month over month and you leave the company, that knowledge is lost. Now you can say, I've invested in the automation, I've written down everything I do. There's continuity. I'm not as critical. In a way, you're not as critical to the current operations of the organization, but you are such an impact if you were to leave, because you've fixed all of the mundane, the day to day, and you are actually an asset to them that you can focus on the future, and the future building of the new, the innovative, you can move your business, your company forward. And I think that's the part of the messaging of try to solve the mundane, keep that going so that there is continuity. And then also, if somebody does leave a key resource, it's not, well, what do we start? How do I now need to take on the work of 3 people? No, it's just been automated anyway. So now it's just stepping up and finding somebody with the right amount of knowledge to continue this and move us forward. So something to think about. And then the last one is continuous risk measurement. We're terrible at. We get snapshots of point in time of, we'll pay somebody to come in and do a maturity assessment or pen test. I just showed you a few examples where you can run queries in a matter of minutes to look at your attack surface time over time. That's free. I mean, this entire setup costs about under probably $5. Now, I will say one of the caveats if you're using SageMaker is that you should shut down your instance when you're not running it, because it will rack up costs. I mean, you're paying for a server to run persistently. So make sure you set up some sort of Lambda or something that's going to disconnect or move it and shut it down. Because if you only use it and you start it up whenever you need it, it's literally, you're talking dollars a month. And if you run it all the time, I mean, you might rack up $100 or $200. So just be careful with those things, especially as you're working with cloud. But if you are smart about it, you shut down your resources, there's unlimited compute capability opportunities within being able to leverage the latest, greatest innovative products, services, solutions that businesses and companies are adopting anyway. So whether or not you know it from a security standpoint, your peers around you are using it. Let's use these tools too to move the industry forward. Let's check our results here. Oh, there we go. We got it. So these are all the different URLs now in Common Crawl that have CMD in the end. So if you're just looking for a bug bounty, I mean, this you definitely don't want to start targeting all of these. But let's say maybe they have responsible disclosure programs and things. I mean, we can start targeting and seeing maybe there's a framework under here that a lot of these are using the common PHP library that just has CMD exposed or how it's referenced. So there's quite a few results here. So there's not as many. Oh yeah, we scanned through. So that was 2 minutes and 6 seconds, and we searched 354 gigabytes of data. So that's not too bad. That was pretty fast. But you could put in whatever Euro query you wanted and search for those. So just thinking in terms of opportunities. Don't if you do use this technique and get some good bounties or something, let me know. I mean, that's exciting. I'd be just as excited for you to get it anyway. So definitely some takeaways. That wraps up this presentation. If you're still with me, I haven't checked Discord, but hopefully everybody's still there. I think we got a couple minutes left here, some links, but I think I already put everything in Discord of where to access all these resources, and I'll hand it back to Omar, but I really appreciate it. This has been awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. If I can get off mute. Thank you so much. Great presentation, and thank you for supporting the DEF CON Red Team Village and Texas Cyber Summit. So for all the attendees out there, as Ryan mentioned, please feel free to join the conversation at our Discord servers. You will find the link at the event website, which is in the bottom of the screen. And we will go on a brief break until the next presenter, will be live in around 15 minutes or so. So see you then.